Please, can you give me some mics, please? Yeah, and then. No. We have mics, please. Yeah. So, I guess we'll have three mics. So you can rotate the mics. Yeah, and the floor is yours. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. So, they'll start it. Yes. Are we ready? Hello, hello. We're not on yet. You realize that? I think he needs to open a fader over there.
Does this work? No.
Not so. Hello. You think so? Hello? No. Oh. Can you guys hear us?
No. Kind of. More importantly, can the videographers pick up this?
Are your mics working? Mic. Yeah. Yeah, I guess we have all these technical glitches every time. So, can you just, check?
Yes. This is Akwe.
Hello.
Yeah, I guess it's working. Yeah, please, go ahead.
You can hear us?
Slightly on. Oh,
Oh,
Yes,
that's nice.
thank
I'm
you.
not sure that. Yes. Can you? I'm not sure. Is this live? Is this mic live? Okay. Fine. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Akwe Amosu, member of the Global Voices board, and a member of this community since 2008, more or less. And very, very privileged to be able to do this with my lovely colleagues. I am a third culture kid, for those who know what that means, and I can claim allegiances of various kinds in 4 separate countries. And so I feel quite well qualified to host this conversation, but not at all qualified to answer its animating question, where are you really from? This is a very difficult question to answer, as I hope we're going to illustrate. And the good thing is, I don't have to. My lovely colleagues here are the ones who have to try and answer this question. So I want them to introduce themselves. Can I ask you to go first, Safa?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Safa. Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Hi, I'm Safa. I am Palestinian, but I grew up in the U.S. and I live in Germany.
Amaya?
I'm Amaya. I am Indian. I grew up in India, but I have lived in the US and in Spain.
And Oleg.
Hi, everyone. You can hear me right now, right? I'm Oleg. I am Korean, Ukrainian, currently living in Taiwan.
Thank you. Okay, so it's no accident that Global Voices would center a question like this. I've never been in any other community that has so many people with multiple, diverse, hybrid origins, diversities, diversity and identities. And so it feels very natural that this question, which is so often unattended to, can be brought up into the open for us to test a little bit and understand what's really important here. And I think it's a community that, as a result of that membership, is not open to those very narrow definitions, those very prescriptive ideas about who a person is. And I think it's perhaps in the Global Voices space, it seems like an odd question to be focused on, but I think we all know in the outside world how often we encounter a reaction that takes it for granted that the answer is simple. Where are you from? Who are you? That there should be a simple answer. Oh, I'm X nationality, or I'm X job, or whatever it happens to be. And so I think for me, we want to unpack here why it's not obvious. Why for many of us, that attempt to fit us in a box, to close down the identity question, can feel very hostile and very difficult. So maybe, Oleg, can I start with you? What's your reaction when somebody says, where are you from?
Well, it depends where people ask me that question. Of course, if I'm in Ukraine and people ask me where I'm from, suggesting I'm from elsewhere, I would just mention my province within Ukraine. And if they get confused, I'll just tell them that everyone looks like this there. Now, if it's people from outside of Ukraine, I mean, we all know of what is happening in Ukraine. Russia is currently invading, and we're in an active phase of this war. For many Ukrainians, and for me as well, the answer has become more simplified here. There's a lot of things I can say about myself if people ask me, where are you from? But a simple answer, Ukraine, is already an act of activism for many of us. Just proclaiming this into the world, making sure that people know there are Ukrainian people. And while being a Ukrainian activist myself in Taiwan, I think it's very important that we communicate this. I am Ukrainian, I am diverse Ukrainian. I've been here and there. My parents, have dragged me across the continent. But yeah, it is Ukraine for me.
So often in that situation, they're not really satisfied with your answer. And they say, no, but really, where are you really from? Or, but where's home? So what do you say then?
Well, first I register their reaction. It's always interesting to see how people look like, because that also communicates an intention, right? If they're trying to genuinely know something about my background, I might not get offended by the question, where are you really from, even though I just told you the answer, right? Then I would go a mile to just explain details. But then if it's just in the past, I might just as well say I'm from Korea, even though the first time I visited this country.
So you could see right there the complexity. It depends on who's asking. It depends on where the conversation's happening. It depends on how he feels about the questioner and what their motive or interest might be. It depends on how much time he's got. So just right there, I think we already know that this is not an easy question, and one very much framed in the eye of both the recipient of the question, but then once the conversation starts, also the asker of the question, because they're getting a message too from the way you answer. Okay, Ameya, you just told the room that you have a strong connection with India. I don't want to prejudge what that is by choosing the language that you would use. Can you say something about how you describe your origin?
Well, I grew up in India. I was born in India. I've lived all of my childhood and most of my adult life in India. But I will almost never call myself an Indian. And that, I feel, has more to do with what being Indian stands for in the world today, inside and outside India, and my discomfort with that. Because what India stands for today is, a pretty fascist, right-wing, authoritarian kind of mindset. And I don't like that, obviously. I'm always right. You're not allowed to be right. But the other thing is that I never felt like I belonged in India, because I grew up in a family where we spoke English. I didn't grow up in the state where my supposed mother tongue is spoken. And so I'm not fluent in it, but I also didn't speak the local language where I grew up. And I was a South Indian who lived in North India for a long time. And so I was, again, I didn't belong there. So I've never felt a sense of belonging in India, but also I've never felt that India was interested in wanting me to belong. Like, it's not, so many people in India will say, "Are you Indian?" And I'm just like, I guess not, but maybe accident of birth. So that's kind of how I think about it. But I still feel that my experience is I don't get angry when people ask me where I'm from or where I'm really from, because we are so diverse in India. You're used to asking someone, because we migrate internally a lot. We have 18 official languages. We have like 30 provinces, and each of them is very different. It's kind of like the European Union. You wouldn't say I'm European. You'd say I'm Greek or I'm Dutch. So it's not that odd to be asked that question.
But what's behind it? If somebody says, "But are you really Indian?" What are you hearing behind that question?
I'm hearing that, I don't talk like an Indian, I don't dress like an Indian, or like I'm supposed to as an Indian woman. I mean, I'm kind of not doing a good job of living that today. But in my daily life, I don't behave like an Indian woman should. I'm opinionated, I'm outspoken, I take up space physically, literally, and with my words. And it's kind of interesting because, after our discussion yesterday, I went back and thought about this some more. And to me, actually, the place where I feel like I don't make sense is because of my body. That as a fat woman, I'm not supposed to behave the way I do. I'm supposed to erase myself. And that was kind of an interesting way of thinking of my identity. And yeah, India is not nice to fat people either, of course. So that was that.
Thank you. I mean, I think that tells us a whole new layer, because we're not just talking about nationality or, geographic separation. This is all happening within one country where there should be access to a lot of mutual understanding. And I think it gets away from a simple understanding of this question: where are you really from? And perhaps it takes us to something like, where do you really belong? And who speaks for you, who accepts you? And so I want to go to you, Safa, because I know these are questions that you have grappled with. Where are you really from?
Yeah. So for me, this question, it feels painful. I feel like being a Palestinian is a beautiful thing. It carries with it a great deal of responsibility, especially being the child of a Nakba survivor. I have this responsibility to not forget, to not stop saying I'm Palestinian. And at the same time, when people ask me that question, because I live in Western countries, the question is usually aggressive. It's usually meant to erase me, because oftentimes the answer I give is not good enough. They don't accept it. And I hear a lot of things that are hurtful. But on the flip side, I do want to also share that when I meet a Palestinian and they ask me, "Where are you from?" usually what they mean is my mom's village. So I can say, my mom is from Safad, my dad is from Yafa, and they know exactly what that means. They know, if we may or may not even be related, because a lot of us lost these connections. And so I guess, even though in some ways it can be a hurtful question, in other ways, depending on who's asking, like you said, Oleg, it can also be a way to connect again and remember and unify.
And I'm wondering how this past year has been for you in terms of adding another layer, the enormous amount of contention and polarization. Has that changed the extent to which you want to claim in conversation with other people an identity or to assert it?
Definitely. Especially with the genocide in Gaza, it feels like I carry with me, and I know other Palestinians in the diaspora I've met, we carry with us a great deal of grief, of guilt, and it's very painful. And also along with that, again, this feeling of responsibility. We are alive, first of all. That's incredible. And we have a voice, and we have the papers, the passport privilege, whatever. And so it feels like even more of a responsibility now to say it loudly.
Thank you. Oleg, where do you live?
I live in this tiny little island called Taiwan.
So I'm curious about how these questions change if you live in a place that is neither, is not necessarily organically connected to your identity. Is it a place where people ask you that question and it's easy to answer? Or do people assume that you're local? How does...
Well, normally people do assume I'm a local, or they assume I'm an overseas Taiwanese or overseas Chinese who came back to the motherland. I think
Yeah, go.
we're back. Yeah. This question of why I decided to connect, why I naturally connected, but also decided to come to Taiwan, is something I hear a lot. So I started a podcast about it. And there we talk about Taiwanese languages. And we talked briefly during our pre-chat yesterday about this. Language is a huge marker of identity for me, because I am a Uzbekistan-born Korean who lived in Ukraine most of his childhood and adult life, who lives in Taiwan, yet the only language that me and my parents share is our colonial language, that is Russian. And we've entirely lost our dialect of Korean language, And when I got to Taiwan, this country that has over 40 languages and dialects, now 20-something national languages, and numerous indigenous groups who've had this history of losing their language and therefore, having their communities dissolved, their histories distorted, and so on. On this level, I've connected a lot, just sitting on the bus and listening announcements in as many languages as possible. I think that's something that's fascinated me. And they're working on their problems as well, which is what also we cover on my podcast. But that's basically why I feel like I identify with the people of Taiwan a lot.
Please.
I want to just say that even yesterday when we were talking about language, language is where I found belonging in that sense. I mean, I started studying Spanish for absolutely no reason at all. I mean, really. And suddenly I was connected to this very diverse, very wonderful world. And suddenly all these people who welcome me, who don't look at me weird and say like, you shouldn't be here. But it became a way for me to connect so beautifully with so many people that till this day, I always want to learn new languages for this very reason. That in some way, the fact that I could not find that space of belonging or fitting in my in my home country, it is my home country, and somehow I feel like it made me become a person who tries to connect with people everywhere. Maybe I'm looking for the place where I will find that fit, but I also think maybe it's just that I value the ability to connect with people because I feel like I can't connect with people where I'm supposed to be able to connect with people.
So is it the fact that being involved or associated with multiple languages removes the pressure to be a single identity? Or is it that it drowns the need to talk about a single identity because there are so many other voices? What's happening with your love of these diverse languages and participation in diverse languages?
Is it an escape of sort? Perhaps.
I mean, I know for myself, every time I live in New York, in Brooklyn, every time I see a sign from New York City government that's listing, 60 different languages and communicating the same message over and over again in all those languages and all those scripts, I feel safer. That's a strange thing because I don't have anything to do with any of those communities. But there's something about being in a place that's enormously diverse that makes me feel more comfortable. So I'm just curious whether that's a shared experience.
I used to say that, I want to leave India and live abroad. And then people would say, but it's hard there too. And I would say that, I don't mind not belonging in a foreign country. And maybe that's the thing, that when there are so many languages out and about, you feel like, oh, there's no like middle line that you're supposed to fit with. Like there's room for all these languages, there's room for all these ways of being, there's room for all these ways of communicating. So I'll figure it out. As opposed to, no, you have to speak only this. And then you're kind of like,
And oftentimes things that they have rewritten, and oftentimes in our history or erased it or whatever it may be. So in some ways it's quite sad. But I do have to say, I when I first moved to Germany, I was really thankful that I didn't understand the language at all, because at least there I was definitely a foreigner, like no doubt about it. Definitely a foreigner, like no doubt about it. And whereas when I was growing up in the U.S., it was, literally everyone told me I'm a foreigner. It didn't matter what paper I was holding, I was an outsider. But also, I never grew up in Palestine, so it would be insincere for me to say that I am from Palestine, because I am not. And that's the point, right, of being a diaspora group, is that we want to be from there, we want to grow up there, we want to have the option, and we don't have it. But at least in a totally foreign place like Germany, there's no doubt I'm a total outsider. It's fine.
Did you? I mean, I'm just curious whether that. I mean, I can totally see the advantage from the way you describe it. It removes some of the assault, if you like, from the other environment. But I wonder what it's like at some deeper level not to be able to claim a space.
Yeah. It's I'm not a very fun person to talk to, because it's very painful. It's basically, I'm always an outsider, just always. I think sometimes I have these moments where I can feel like I can be an insider in some groups. For example, when I visit my aunties in Jordan, sometimes I can feel like an insider to some extent, but there's always a limit. But definitely in the West, I feel like I always feel this way of being on the boundary, being on the border, being on the outside, and not quite getting in. And sometimes it's because I don't want to get in. But even when I wanted to, when I was a teenager, it was not possible really for me in those kinds of classical definitions of what it means to be X, Y, or Z. But it's also, the US is also a colonized place. So it's silly.
Slightly pivoting away from this, in the session description, you will probably have noticed that there's a reference to authoritarianism. And I'd just like to ask the three of you why that's there. What is the relevance of these identity questions when it comes to authoritarianism? Why is that an issue?
well, for me personally, it makes me do the reverse of what Safa does, which is I don't say I'm Indian, I say I'm from India. And it's a very small, very semantic difference, but it makes a difference to me, because I'm trying to say that, look, yeah, I kind of am from there, but I don't buy into that very horrifying authoritarian society we've built up. It's not just the government that's authoritarian. Indian society is very authoritarian, very patriarchal. There's a notion of, the man, the head of the household, who issues the decree, and he says what will be, and everyone just runs around and makes sure it happens. And much how the current government operates as well, which is quite funny. So to me, that becomes part of it. And it also becomes a question of whether or not it's okay to be fully open with myself. Like, I don't want to be identified as a journalist in India. Unfortunately, Google already does that. But I should say over here, though, I do want to make one point. As a wealthy Brahmin woman, I am basically a white man in India. Okay? I have all the privilege you can possibly have. I have education, I have family support, I have lived abroad, I have traveled. I'm in GV. So, I do feel a little bit like I don't even face real issues the way that my other journalist colleagues or even my friends who are exactly the same background as me but Muslim. You know, what kind of things they have to deal with in their daily life, the kind of things they don't say, the kind of, oh, I'm going to name my child a name that doesn't clearly show that they're Muslim. I'm going to order only chicken because if he says meat, they'll assume it's beef, even if it's mutton or goat, you know. So I feel like I don't even have the tiniest bit of space to really complain about any of this.
Well, humility is always good, but I'm not sure that I agree. But I want to go to Oleg because speaking for myself, just a brief intervention. Growing up in Nigeria, half English, half Nigerian, my own family would regularly ask me questions like, "Can you eat this food? It's got pepper in it," as if I had not grown up eating their food, and it's something to do with the appearance. It makes it difficult for them to imagine me eating the food they eat, despite the fact that we're all in one family. And I think for me, this has something to do with the authoritarianism question.
Question: what authoritarianism is for us right now? In
some way different, not considered truly American because they were not white. The Haitians who were supposed to be eating dogs and cats. I wonder what it's like for you, this question of authoritarianism. Where does that fit in?
Yeah, it's I feel like this point is very connected to me. I mean, anyway, by being Palestinian and by telling people I am considered a threat to Israel, to the United States, and to Germany. And you know, part of it is this sort of, I guess you can say, inconvenienceness or inconvenient truth that we pose, diaspora kids, when we say we exist, when we say we remember, when we know the customs and the words and the stories, and we are posing a threat to anyone who wants to erase us. And no matter where that is, I see it a lot. And I think especially also in places like you said, the United States, also Germany, where there's a lot of, yeah, it's kind of an assault on all sides. That's what it feels like for me.
So I want to give people a chance to ask questions, but I do want to ask one more thing up here, which is what does Global Voices do for you in the context of this conversation we have just had?
Yeah, I'm very grateful to Global Voices. After October 7th, 2023, I started writing and publishing pieces about Palestine on the platform, and it's given me a small sense of contribution back to my people. If I could just write something, if I could just publish something, maybe I can do anything to help. And I think part of it is a naivety, it's a genocide, it's out of my hands. But on the other side, I think hope is the most important thing right now. And that's what Global Voices provides me, this space that I can practice my documentation skills, my journalistic skills, my writing skills, and ultimately practice that hope.
Mm. Can I ask you both the same question, Amaya?
Global Voices, not to be overly corny, but Global Voices is home. I have never had the privilege, the fortune to be part of an organization that gives me such a feeling of being seen and appreciated and celebrated in itself. Whether it's, you know, foster kittens climbing my chair or editing or sitting on this panel or translating. Global Voices gives me hope, Safa. You're absolutely right. In the world that we live in today, it keeps me going because I'm like, I don't know if we're going to manage to do anything but I know that there are these wonderful people all over the world who get up every day and try. You know, even if some days all we can manage to do is cry together, but they're there, and that we all see each other and hold space for each other. So very much so.
Thank you. And Oleg, it's, I mean, a very, very diverse community. How does that relate?
Well, I'm quite new to Global Voices, actually. I'm sure I'm yet to feel, the solidarity within this week. I think especially this crystallized into how we've been sitting and ideating about what we can do together. And being a Ukrainian activist amidst the war that is so active and so bloody, it's very easy to forget that there are also movements across the world that you can actually connect with. You can talk to each other. And I know that geopolitics is a very complex thing, and we are victims to it as well. But nothing should prevent us from being able to talk to each other. I would speak rather as a reader of Global Voices, I guess. I have more history there than being a part of the movement. Seeing stories from across the world, especially what some people call the Global South, I think is very important for us, because that makes us actually aware of how, some of the fights out there are similar, especially if we're talking about authoritarianism and the rise of right-wing ideologies, and of course, ethno-nationalism that we are facing. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'd love to open the floor. Do we have somebody out there with mics to pass around?
US, like people will walk up to you on the street, total strangers, and be like, "Oh, where are you from? You look different. Are you Greek?" Or like they'll just say whatever, and just total strangers. And those are the situations that I'm like, okay, I need to get out of here. So yeah, usually I'll give like like what you were saying, the answer of, "Oh well, I grew up down the street. Okay, bye." But I think when I can see that people are more sincere, I try. But also then, even when people start with a sincere way, sometimes they'll surprise me and say something really hurtful. Because I think sometimes even well-meaning people don't realize how hurtful some of the things that they can say are. Yeah.
Thank you. What about you two?
I think, yeah, exactly. It depends largely on what I register as the intention of the person asking. And then, of course, I might give a short answer if I feel like I need to preserve my energy and just get on with my life. Or if I see that perhaps this person is a friend that I will be, connected to for the rest of my life, they should know, since they are already curious about the complexity behind my identity, right? So I would tell them pretty much everything, sentence by sentence, guide them through the history of Korean forcible resettlement by the Soviet government into Central Asia, which is why we eat shashlik at home. And then I have to explain why shashlik is different from the one in Central Asia, because we Koreanized it a little bit. And things like that, yeah.
I mean, my answer is always short. I'm from India, right? But I do get mistaken for Latina when I'm outside India. So that's fun. But that's such a fun thing for me. I like to be like, yeah, guess which country I'm from, and then like keep tabs on the list. So I don't have too much to say about this.
What about the disempowerment and curating question, like the decision to kind of construct your own reality?
Yeah, that one I think is a good one, because it really did become, it really happened sometime, I want to say in my 30s. Slowly building up until one day you're just like, I don't care what you think. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to be who I want to be. But I'm also, I mean, again, I'm sorry to say this again, Akwe, but I do think I have a lot of power and privilege that enables me to do that. I can walk out and in my workplace and say that, oh, I have depression. And know that my boss is not going to be like, okay, call HR and find a way to get rid of her. Or something like that. I can do it. I know I can say to my family that, no, I don't want to have children. And I know they're not going to do one huge drama. I mean, all the South Asians here know exactly what it means that if you as a woman tell your parents you're not going to have children, right? But my family is not like that. So, I mean, and those are very personal things, but on a larger level as well, I walk into a police station and you're going to try and, he's going to look at me and he's going to assume an identity, which is correct. But that assumption that he makes is going to change the way he treats me. And for me, actually, what happened was reaching the point when I realized that I was like, why do people complain so much? It's actually easy. And then that's the day I realized that, oh, wait, actually, it's easy for me. It's not easy for everyone else. And that was a big turning point for me as far as this goes.
So in theory, we have to end in 2 minutes, but I'm going to break the rules and run up till 1 o'clock. That's in full deference and respect to the timekeeper over there. I will take 3 more very brief questions, and then we'll close after that. So let me see. Yeah, right at the back over there. I have a. Go
Okay.
ahead.
I don't know if you can hear me.
It's
All right. Thank you. It's actually a very interesting session. And coincidentally, someone asked me this morning, I was just meeting the person and she said, so where do you call home? And I'm like, okay. I'm from Nigeria and I live in Finland. After this summit, I'm going back to Finland. So Finland is my home now. And it brings me to the question of where do you call home, or what do you call home? Is it a community? Is it the country where you're born in? Or is it where you're from? Or is it entirely?
okay, great. Thank you. 2 more. Yes, sir. Well, there should be a mic over here. We want you to have a mic because they're filming the session.
Hold it close.
Chetri. I'm from Nepal. I'm involved with an organization called Citizenship Affected People's Network. So it was wonderful to hear all your diverse experiences and the challenges you faced. But ironically, in Nepal, there are legal and administrative hurdles for children of single mothers who want to get citizenship in their names. In other words, they don't have a single identity, right? So I was just wondering how we could team up with Global Voices, our organization. In what ways could we team up to fight for gender equal citizenship laws globally? Thank you.
Thank you. 1 more. Yes, right behind you, the lady behind you.
Hi, can you hear me? All right. I'm Afia from Tech Global Institute, and Ameya, I relate to your experience as a woman in India because I'm a woman in Bangladesh, where religion-driven rigidity and patriarchy define life. I was wondering, did you ever feel the urge to, fight the status quo and eventually give up? Or was distancing your identity, your individual identity from India always an intentional stance for you?
Thank you. So if I'll ask the panel to just only answer 1 question and as briefly as you can. Go ahead, Ameya, since that one was for
I'm
you.
going to cheat and do 2. But only because asking me the question of where do I call home is hilarious, because last night we were having dinner and I said, I'm tired, I'm going home. And everyone was like, what? And I said, home. Home is where I am. And that's how I define home. But to this question about intentionality, my mother is a very unconventional woman. So the idea of not doing what you're told or what's expected is quite normal in my life. But I don't think I did it intentionally until I was in my 30s. Now it's intentional. But then it was just like, this is what I do. Why are you looking at me funny? So.
Thank you. And I think both Oleg and Safa have got reason to care about citizenship rights. Just curious and sort of, your papers. You are not your papers. Just curious about what you think about Global Voices kind of contributing.
The efforts by GV to publish and amplify voices of grassroots movements and activists is what contributes to our basically better awareness of these structures.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to close. I want to ask each of you to do 1 thing.
Literal admin point, sir, with the question about partnerships, come and find me.
Good. I like action. So we don't like the question, where are you really from? Good question. What would you like to be asked?
I like to be asked, tell me about yourself.
Nice. How about you two?
I don't mind where you're from, but if there is also, I'm curious about you, where are you from? That gives an intention. Yeah. Wouldn't mind that.
I'm usually the asker of this question. So I like to say things like, would you like to tell me more? Or I would love to learn more when someone answers a straight question.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody. And may I ask you to join me in thanking these fantastic panelists?
Thank you, thank you. A warm round of applause, please, to our speakers and to our moderator. Now I have two announcements to make. So there are like two stations, one right where you had coffee and one downstairs. And we have 1 hour time, and we'll gather here again after 1 hour. And there's a really, really interesting session on what you can learn from environmental journalism in South Asia. Please, thank you. Let's head for the lunch.
We did, that's Wednesday.
Okay, good.